O Lord, I used to stand in prayer by the night and by day. Allah will say, you are lying. The angels will say to him, you are lying. Then Allah will say to him, you only wanted it to be said that so and so is a qari or a reader or an alim. Then the one who had a lot of wealth will be brought, and Allah will say to him, did I not bestow upon you abundantly so that you had no need of anybody else? He will say, yes, O Lord. Allah will say, what did you do with what I gave you? He will say, O Lord, I used to uphold ties of kinship and give in charity. Allah will say to him, you are lying. The angels will say to him, you are lying. Then Allah will say to him, you only wanted it to be said that so and so is generous, and that was said. Then the one who will be killed for the sake of Allah will be brought. And Allah will say to him, what were you killed for? He will say, oh Lord, I was commanded to engage in jihad, and I fought until I was killed. Allah will say to him, you are lying. Angel will say to him, you are lying. Then Allah will say to him, you only wanted it to be said, so and so is generous, so and so is brave, and that was said. Then Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam struck my knees, that is the knees of Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, and said, O Abu Huraira, these three will be the first amongst the creation of Allah for whom the fire will be heated on the day of resurrection. Believer, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the believer will be brought close. Allah will hide the believer, conceal the believer's faults. Allah will bring the believer close to him, shelter him, and cover him, and then say to him, do you acknowledge such and such sin? Do you acknowledge such and such sin? Until he will say, yes, O Lord, until he has acknowledged all his sins. Then he will think to himself that he is doomed, because he has acknowledged all his sins. He will be doomed. Then Allah will say to him, I concealed it for you in this world, and I forgive you for it this day. And he will be given his record of good deeds. Allah, now, the settling of scores. Allah, the fair and just, will settle scores among all creation, between the oppressed and the oppressor. So there is no outstanding wrong between anyone. Scores will be settled even amongst the animals. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I quote, whoever hits someone with a whip or something else unjustly, a score will be settled against him on the day of resurrection. Unquote. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I quote, whoever wrongs his brother, or sister for that matter, whoever wrongs his brother with regard to his honor or something else, should seek his pardon, his forgiveness now. Now, before the day comes when neither dinars nor dirhams will be of any use. If he has, on that day, if he has any good deed, an amount equal to the wrong will be taken of him and given to the victims. And if he has no good deed, then wrongs of the victims will be put on him. Unquote. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said, do you know who amongst my ummah is the bankrupt? Do you know who is the bankrupt amongst my ummah? The Sahaba said, O Rasulullah, the one who have no money or possessions. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, amongst my ummah, the one who is bankrupt is the one who will come on the day of judgment with salat, with fasting and zakat to his credit. But because he insulted, slandered that one, consumed the wealth of this one, shed the blood of that one, and beaten that one, all his hasanat, good deeds, will be taken off him to give to the victim. And if his hasanat runs out before the judgment is passed, then the sins of the victims will be cast on him, and he will be cast into hellfire. Unquote. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said, actually Aisha radiallahu anha said, I quote, that a man came and sat in front of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, "O Rasulullah, I have two slaves who lie against me, who betray against me, and who disobey me." Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what is my position? And I beat them and insult them. What is my position with respect to this on the day of judgment? Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, on the day of resurrection, that is on the day of judgment, their disobedience, lying, and treachery will be measured against your punishment of them. If your punishment is commensurate with their sins deserved, then there is nothing to settle. But if your punishment of them is less than their punishment, the punishment that they deserved, then this will count in your favor. But if your punishment of them is more than the sins that they deserved, then a score will be settled against you. The man turned away and started to weep because he realized all his good deeds will be transferred. Enormity of bloodshed. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I quote, that the one who would be killed will bring his killer on that day of resurrection, holding his forelock in his hand, holding the forelock of his killer in his hand, and his veins running with blood. He will say, "O Lord, ask this man why he killed me." And he will, until he brings them nearer to the throne. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the first matter concerning which people will have to account for is salat. And first matter concerning which judgment will be passed on that day will be bloodshed. Scores will be settled even amongst the animals and amongst the jinns, birds, wild beasts. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, scores will be settled even against the animals. The beast with horn will settle score. The beast without horn, or the hornless beast, will settle score with the beast with horn, until there is nothing to settle. At that point, Allah will say, "Be you dust." At that point also the kafir will say, "Would that I were dust." Now what about the believers? Believers will also settle scores amongst them. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I quote, when believers have been saved from the hellfire, they will be detained at a bridge between the heaven and hell, paradise and hell, where they will settle any outstanding wrongs between them in this world. And when they have been purified, then they will be given permission to enter Jannah, that is paradise, by the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Any of them on that day will be more familiar with his dwelling in paradise than his house in this world. He will be more familiar with his dwelling in paradise than his house in this world. Now the balance. After the reckoning has been completed, balance will be set up. Balance to weigh people's deeds. Balance is for the purpose of requital, to weigh people's deeds. That is how great their good deeds are and how serious their hasanat are, how serious crimes are, and how great their good deeds are. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, وَنَدَوْا مَوَازِينَ الْكِسْتَ لِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ وَإِنْ فَلَا تُظْلَمُوا نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا وَإِنْ كَانَ مِثْقَالَ حَبَّةٍ مِّنْ خَرْدَلٍ آتَيْنَا بِهَا وَكَفَى بِنَا حَاسِبِينَ. Allah says, and we shall set up balances of justice on the day of resurrection. And then no soul shall be wronged unjustly in anything. Even if there be weight of a mustard seed, we shall bring it out. And sufficient are we to take account. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam